Welcome back to Culture and Peace. I trust you all are beginning to at least consider how you will be introducing your reason for being in this Peace Masters and your hopes and aspirations for the course. I would like to help you. I have been teaching in Peace Studies for almost 2 decades, and I do understand some of the questions that students often have when they hear Peace Studies, Culture and Peace. So what I'm going to do today, and what I will do many days, is turn to a PowerPoint lecture to help explain some of the foundational concepts. That's what I'm going to do right now, is cut to my introductory PowerPoint lecture. Now, Culture and Peace has several foundational concepts, and I hope I have decided to introduce what is manageable for you, because as I said in my first lecture, my goal with this course is to empower your own capacity and skill as a real-world peace builder. My goal is not to overwhelm you with esoteric, scholarly, academic information. So please feel comfortable giving me feedback if I am overwhelming you or something does not make sense. Now, let me give you a little cultural perspective before I say more. Years ago, I had many Japanese middle managers visiting the United States in order to study American culture and practice their English. These were top-level, middle-level managers from companies like Toyota, Honda, the soy sauce company, Kikkoman, you can imagine. And I had them come to one of my American classrooms. I don't know which of you have visited the United States, my country, or have even lived, studied, spent time here. So bear with me if you've had your experience with American classrooms. For those of you who never have, this is what happened. The Japanese, and these were all men, came to my room and they sat there and they saw my students raise their hands and speak up after I had given my, what I call a mini lecture. And later they said to me, I cannot believe, they had known me been with me for several weeks. They felt comfortable in private, being open. They said, I cannot believe how disrespectful your students were. They actually spoke up in your class. And I needed to explain to them that in my classrooms, in American classrooms, students speaking up and dialoguing, engaging honestly with the professor is considered the best of teaching and learning and respect. So please, I encourage you to feel comfortable conversing with me. Okay, the first question that often comes when beginning a course in peace studies is, what is peace? And this may seem like a simple question, but as you all know, it is not easy to answer, and it is even more difficult to build and create and live. Now, scholars have decided to distinguish between negative peace, which is defined as an absence of war or violent conflict, and what they call positive peace. Positive peace is defined, and I think I adapt this from the UNESCO definition, complex layers of ever-changing dynamics and the many conditions and institutions that play a role in containing and challenging destructive behavior. So as you can see, positive peace is much more complex and nuanced than negative peace. Now, I imagine in this course, it would be enough for many of you if you could find your way to negative peace I found the same. I have a colleague who was behind the Nobel Peace Prize winners from Northern Ireland, found the same in his perspective. A negative peace was worth gold for people who had lived in the face of this heart-wrenching, violent conflict, this humiliating, unjust conflict for lifetimes. At the same time, in a course called Culture and Peace, I will necessarily need to include positive peace as well as negative peace. The other question, what is culture? And in my first introduction to you, I introduced that I have a much more complex definition than many people in the world today. And partially it's probably because I grew up with 3 languages and 3 cultures from childhood on. You may be surprised to hear that in the world, at least in the world of scholarship today, there are over 150 definitions of culture. Now, I'm not expecting you to study these definitions and pick one. Instead, I want to give you the freedom, the dignity to introduce to each one of us your own culture from your perspective and experience, and as well as allow everyone else to do the same in this class. For the purpose of this course, I am going to give you a simple definition to help you with that exploration and expression. Beliefs, traditions, and that might be seen as habits, and communication patterns of an identifiable group. And this is normally the group that has raised us as children, that has raised us as members of churches. You get to decide. I have worked with many tribal leaders, indigenous leaders in this country, and for them that would be a tribal group. We identify with whatever community we will express as our culture. Here are some of the elements of culture. If you were in an anthropology course, I think actually one of you has studied anthropology quite intensively, and I welcome her discussion and feedback, elaboration of culture for all of our benefit. But the elements I'm going to focus on for this introduction, nonverbal communication, so that, they often will say, you start to understand another's culture when you understand their humor, their comedy, their jokes. That is a sign that you are deeply understanding the culture, and that's nonverbal. That's visceral. One of the reasons I was told years ago, because I wondered, why were tribal leaders from tribal nations in the United States, and if you have been here, and especially if you've lived here or you've studied our history, you will know that our original people, indigenous cultures, were given independent tribal nation status when the treaties were negotiated after colonization and war. And so we have many independent tribal nations throughout the United States, as well as our overriding Obama-led federal government and all of the different states within this country. They have independent court systems, law enforcement, everything. And I wondered years ago, why was I being asked to help tribal leaders? I grew up with Norwegian, German, and English-speaking people, white people. I would think they would identify me as part of the enemy, the other, the colonizer, for many good reasons. But One of the pieces of feedback I got after I had stood up in front of White Earth Indian Reservation people is that somehow I got their humor and they got my humor. There was that bridge, common ground that brought us closer together. Certainly it was not language. Each of these nation states, they have their own languages, and they often have connections with people around the world based on language. And then last but not least, cultural groups share understanding and agreements about relationships and expectations, how women act, how elders are treated, in many cultures respected. Our cultures are full of these understandings and agreements that we adopted as children. We do not need to negotiate these agreements. We understand them deeply in our beings. Now, a culture of peace is a mystery in the world today for many human beings. Let me talk about how we will approach a culture of peace in our class. A culture that promotes peaceable diversity. So that means when we do our cultural activity, and if some of you don't feel like you belong to a group within the class, you are honored and respected as a minority voice, and you will receive the same respect and treatment as those class members who belong to the largest affinity group in the class. We welcome difference. The ceaseless culture creating activity that characterizes the social body involves interaction at every level. And this is, it might be mind-blowing, but this is the reality of peace. We must be constantly creating peace at the intrapersonal level, which is within. Gandhi talked about soul power. However you experience your inner world, your consciousness, your values, your beliefs, that's intrapersonal. We must be, those of us who have committed to nonviolence and peace in the world today, prepared to nurture and care for our thoughts, our feelings, our trauma, our woundedness, the need for healing, all within. So there's a lot to study about creating peace within. And actually, when I talk about ahimsa, India's ancient culture of peace, I will talk about my experience with yoga and meditation. But as what most people would classify as a Christian with a strong faith in the world today, I also turn to prayer. I turn to, rigorous self-honesty with scripture. Trying to figure out, am I walking the talk of my values and faith in the world today? That's all intrapersonal. The interpersonal is what goes on between us. So within this class, I'm going to ask you to be building peace within yourself and between each one of you, not just your friends, not just those who belong to your church, but everyone in the class building peace. We do this, of course, in our families, though since I work with family conflict and violence, I know the realities, the truths of how hard this can be in a family today. We try to do it in our neighborhoods. I live, I saw some of the promotional material on the peace program. I actually live in a neighborhood that is between two relatively violent neighborhoods with gang activity, drug trafficking, and too many guns and tragedies to be comfortable. But that is where I live today. We try to build peace there to the best of our ability and within our communities. Excuse the typo here. We continue to do this at all levels of government up until the international level of United Nations. So it's quite complex. And it requires all of us doing it to the best of our ability together. This is from the UNESCO definition, and Elise Boulding has quoted this. She was one of the founders of Peace Studies with her husband. There is a constant interpenetration of levels. And this is happening all the time. Whether we are nurturing and inciting aggression or nurturing and facilitating building peace depends on patterns developed in every domain. Each one of us matters. But what our societies create for government structures at all levels matters too. We have our work set out for us. These are the levels that we will come back to again and again throughout this course. Once again, at the very bottom is what lies within. So if you have anger and hatred and trauma and deep grief, within, that needs to be addressed for peace building. You must address your own conflict between persons, and then going up to intra-group, which means, within our community, our family, our churches, there is conflict, and we must build peace within our own personal groups, as well as intergroup, which is between groups, for example, Israeli-Palestinian. But it doesn't end there. The political, organizational, community systems make a big difference in whether we experience peace or aggression, violence in our lives. And this involves, corruption versus good governance. It involves justice systems. It involves political accountability and public service. We must also be prepared to do our part with these systems and then going up to the international level between nation states. I have already introduced to you that Gandhi and the ancient Indian culture of ahimsa appears to be the purest culture of peace. But I also want to introduce, and I will be speaking openly about my own faith, my own spiritual practices, my own prayer. Gandhi loved Christianity in its purest, in the New Testament. He found Christ an inspiration, and he studied the New Testament scripture in order to inspire his own nonviolent strategy in liberating India. Gandhi was not always nonviolent, though. He was a fallible human being as well. But what I want to encourage you to do, rather than critique Gandhi or expect that you need to be superhuman rather than fallible, needing forgiveness, is to, if you don't already, try to recognize, and I will say Creator, I understand there are Muslim as well as Christian as well as non-believers in this class. So I will say Creator, God, what Indigenous say, Great Mystery, however you want to define what you believe in. But Gandhi recognized God's ever-present witness and sought daily to hear God's voice within. Now, if you have studied at all what Pope Francis does in his life today, he starts every day in prayer, and discernment, I think, is the word that he uses. He's attempting to hear God's will for him. I would say each of you needs to figure out how to have this type of daily, regular practice yourself. Because I can share, my experience and teachings with building peace, but I cannot live anyone's faith or spiritual life for them. I will tell you that I every day wrestle with conflict within as well as outside. especially as I engage with tragic conflicts like yours. And I am in constant prayer. And I spend every day, unless I absolutely cannot, beginning that day in prayer and seeking to hear this ever-present witness voice within for guidance. This is the path to peace in my experience. We are going to attempt to create a culture of peace in our classroom. And you will not get a chance to study Gandhi's life with my husband, but I will, as an option, I would recommend the Hollywood movie, Academy Award-winning movie on Gandhi, not just to study a successful case study of nonviolent liberation, but also to see the emerging democracy, political organization, multicultural decision-making that was emerging in India, that is the foundation for their multicultural democracy today. We will be openly exploring our cultural differences, that includes religious faith, and I would ask you to practice suspending judgment, having an open ground. I will lead you in seeking and finding common ground and negotiating multicultural parameters that respect everyone in this class equally. And I will also be asking you to volunteer to observe each other and give each other feedback to help you each identify what I call God-given gifts or divine gifts. I believe we have all been created with special gifts that we can contribute to building cultures of peace. That's enough for one lecture. Please feel free to write me or arrange times to talk about questions, concerns.